I came home from a 12-hour shift at the hospital to find my wife standing by the door with her suitcase. Her eyes were red, her voice trembling. She said my mother-in-law showed her proof I was having an affair with my assistant. I blinked, stunned, as she pulled out a crumpled envelope. Inside were 2 letters, both supposedly written by me. One talked about how I'd fallen out of love. The other described secret meetings in hotel rooms. Sarah wouldn't look at me. She said she was going to stay with her mother until she could figure out what to do next. She didn't want to talk. She didn't want to listen. She just left. Now here's what my wife and her mother didn't know. 6 months earlier, I'd installed a hidden camera in my home office. Not because I suspected them, but because I thought our cleaning crew had been moving things around. I never reviewed the footage until that night. And what I found changed everything. What would you do if your mother-in-law was trying to destroy your marriage? From the inside out? Ever been accused of something you didn't do? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories that hit deep and twist hard, don't forget to subscribe. There's always more where this came from. My name is Michael Chen. I'm 38 years old, and I work as a pediatrician at a busy hospital in downtown Chicago. For the past 10 years, I've been married to Sarah, a former high school English teacher who now works part-time as a freelance editor. We met through a friend from med school, and for a while, our life together felt steady, comfortable even. But Sarah came from a different kind of world than I did. Her parents were old money from Lake Forest, the kind who sipped wine at 4 p.m. and wore cashmere indoors. Her mother, Eleanor, was always present. Too present. From the very start, Eleanor smiled with her lips, but her eyes never softened. She'd say things like, "You work so hard, Michael. I just hope you're not too busy to take care of my daughter." Or, "It's nice that you help sick children. That must be rewarding in its own way." At first, I brushed it off. I was used to judgment. I'd built my entire career pushing past expectations, drowning out the noise. Besides, Sarah loved me. That was what mattered. Eleanor visited often at holidays, birthdays, then gradually on random weekends, then on weekdays when I was at work. She claimed it was to help Sarah with errands or to bring soup when Sarah was feeling tired. But something about it never felt right. 6 months ago, I began noticing subtle shifts. Items in my office weren't where I left them. Patient files would be misaligned. A pen I always kept capped was suddenly dried out and open. At first, I thought maybe it was housekeeping. We'd recently hired a new service, and it wasn't uncommon for things to get shuffled around. So I installed a hidden camera. Nothing fancy. Just a small security cam tucked behind my bookshelf, disguised inside a fake clock. It synced with my phone, but I never really checked it. Nothing ever went missing, so I chalked it up to paranoia. Meanwhile, Eleanor's visits grew longer, stretching from an hour to entire afternoons. She'd offer to help tidy up when I wasn't home. And Sarah Sweet, trusting Sarah, welcomed it. She thought it was thoughtful. A mother's love. I stayed quiet, said thank you when Eleanor brought over groceries or folded our laundry. I didn't want to be the husband who created tension between his wife and her mother. But now I realize that silence was my first mistake. There were signs. Eleanor asking oddly specific questions about my assistant at the clinic, like whether she was single or if I ever worked late hours with her. She'd chuckle afterward, but her eyes always stayed fixed, watching for any flicker in my reaction. At dinner, she'd mention articles she read about doctors and scandals, then quickly changed the subject when Sarah gave her a look. Once, I caught her glancing through a stack of bills on the hallway table. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was just curious how we were doing financially. Still, I said nothing, because I believed in Sarah, because I believed the truth would always hold, because I didn't think the woman smiling across my dinner table was planting landmines behind my back. I was wrong. It happened on a Thursday. I had just finished a double shift at the hospital. 4 back-to-back appointments, 2 emergency consultations, and a toddler with a 103-degree fever who wouldn't stop screaming. All I wanted was a shower and 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Instead, I opened the front door to find Sarah standing in the hallway, her suitcase already zipped shut. Her eyes were bloodshot, hands clenched at her sides. The way she looked at me, like I was a stranger, froze me in place. "I saw the letters," she said. At first, I didn't understand. "What letters?" She pulled out a wrinkled envelope from her tote bag and tossed it onto the counter. 2 pieces of paper, folded once, slid out. Both were handwritten in a style that vaguely resembled mine. One letter said, "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I never meant to hurt you." The other detailed an emotional affair with someone from work, a connection I couldn't ignore. "They were in your desk drawer," she said. "Mom found them when she was helping clean." "Helping," I repeated under my breath. "Don't," Sarah warned. "Don't turn this into something it's not." I looked at her, truly looked, and saw that the decision had already been made. She wasn't here to ask questions. She was here to leave. "Did you read them?" I asked. "Do they sound like me?" She looked away. She didn't want logic. She wanted closure. "I'm going to stay at Mom's for a while," she said quietly, "just until I can think clearly." Then she walked out the door. I stood in silence for what felt like an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just shut down. Then my eyes landed on the bookshelf in my office. The clock camera. I'd forgotten it was even there. I moved, quickly grabbed my laptop, connected to the feed, and pulled up the archive. The footage loaded slowly. At first, nothing. Just Eleanor, pacing back and forth in my office while I was at work. She opened drawers, flipped through patient folders. A clear HIPAA violation, by the way. Then came the part that made my hands go cold. She opened her purse, pulled out an envelope, and carefully placed it in my desk. She looked around first, then smiled, like she'd just won a game no one else knew she was playing. The timestamp was from 2 days earlier. I fast-forwarded through more footage from previous weeks. Each time she visited, she went into my office. Each time she handled something. My calendar, my prescription pads, even my laptop when it had been left open. And then I found the most damning clip. Eleanor sitting on her couch, speaking on the phone. "I already planted the letters," she whispered. "She'll find them. And when she does, it's over." She paused. "No, she won't question it. She trusts me." Another pause. "Yes, I've already started talking to her about separating assets." I stopped the video. There was more. There were dozens of files. Hours of manipulation. But I didn't need to see it all. I knew what I had to do. Not just to protect myself, but to protect the truth. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat there, alone in the living room, watching the footage play over and over, as if repetition would somehow dull the shock. It didn't. Eleanor hadn't just manipulated Sarah. She'd crafted a narrative, a calculated attack designed to dismantle everything we'd built. And the worst part? It worked. Sarah was gone. My wife, my partner, the person I thought knew me better than anyone, had walked out the door, believing I was a liar and a cheat. Because her mother said so. Because of 2 forged letters, planted in a drawer, by the same woman who hugged me on Thanksgiving and called me son at Christmas. There was no more pretending, no more giving her the benefit of the doubt. This wasn't interference. It was sabotage. And the more I watched, the deeper the rot went. I found a clip from the day before Sarah confronted me. Eleanor was in our kitchen, speaking softly on the phone. "Yes, he'll deny it," she said. "But by then she won't believe a word he says. She's already started questioning how much time he spends at the hospital. I've been planting seeds for months." Another pause. "No, She doesn't suspect a thing. She thinks I'm protecting her. I closed the laptop slowly, feeling something inside me crack not break just shift. That cold clarity people talk about? It's real. There comes a point when the pain doesn't even sting anymore. It just settles into focus. I transferred the footage to a secure drive, backed it up to the cloud, then made copies. One for my attorney, one for myself, and one I planned to show Sarah. But I didn't call her right away. No. She didn't believe me when I begged for 5 minutes of conversation. She didn't believe me when I told her, to my face, that the letters were fake. This time, I wasn't going to plead. I was going to show her. 2 days later, I asked her to meet me at a neutral place, a small cafe she loved on the north side, where we used to go during her grading breaks. She agreed, reluctantly. I got there early, sat in the back booth, laptop open, no words. When she arrived, she looked tired, worn down in a way I hadn't seen before. Not angry anymore, just uncertain. I don't want to fight, she said. I'm not here to fight, I replied. I just need you to watch something. I didn't explain. I just hit play. At first, she didn't react. She watched Eleanor enter the office, pull out the envelope, and place it carefully inside the drawer. Then came the audio. Eleanor's voice on the phone, discussing asset division, manipulating doubts, boasting about how easy it was to turn Sarah against me. By the third clip, Sarah had covered her mouth with one hand. Her eyes were glassy, her body frozen. When the final clip ended, Eleanor whispering, once she divorces him, she'll move back home where she belongs. Sarah slowly closed the laptop. And then she whispered, oh my God, what did she do to us? I didn't say anything. I just sat with her, let the weight of it crash in. Because some betrayals don't need explanation. They speak for themselves. Sarah didn't say much after that. She sat across from me, staring blankly at the empty coffee cup in front of her. Her hands trembled slightly. She looked like she was trying to breathe through water. I need to go, she finally said. I nodded. She stood up, turned to leave, then stopped. Without looking back, she whispered, thank you for showing me. That night, she didn't return to Eleanor's house. She checked into a hotel under her maiden name. The next morning, she called me just one word on the voicemail. Lawyer. We met again 2 days later, this time at a legal office near River North. She brought a family attorney. I brought mine. We weren't there to divide assets. We were there to build a case. You see, what Eleanor didn't know, what she never even considered, was that her arrogance had left a trail, a digital one. The footage from my office wasn't the only thing. Sarah started checking her own phone records, her emails, and found dozens of subtle manipulations. Messages from Eleanor forwarding gossip articles, screenshots of vague doctor scandals, subtle questions that now felt loaded in hindsight. She remembered the time Eleanor asked if I'd ever had a work trip to Phoenix. The time she said, Michael seems distant lately, doesn't he? It was all there. A slow poisoning. My attorney compiled everything into a comprehensive affidavit. The video footage, the audio files, Sarah's testimony, and a digital forensics report confirming the letters found in my drawer were printed using Eleanor's home printer. Model, HP, NV 6000, 400. Same ink cartridge serial. Same font setting. It was surgical and damning. Sarah confronted her mother in private. I wasn't there. Didn't need to be. I didn't want to hear the excuses. Didn't care for Eleanor's justifications. But Sarah told me what happened. At first, Eleanor denied everything. She claimed I'd doctored the videos, accused me of staging the footage. But when Sarah laid out the timeline, the printer report, the matching timestamps, the matching IP address from Eleanor's house, Eleanor's defense cracked. Still, she didn't apologize. She just said, I did what I had to do. You were drifting from me. He was pulling you away." That was all Sarah needed to hear. She walked out of the house and never returned. But I wasn't done, because Eleanor had done more than sabotage a marriage. She'd violated patient privacy. Every time she touched a file in my office, she committed a HIPAA violation. And I had it all on tape. I didn't want to press charges, but I could. So I made an offer. Through my lawyer, I sent Eleanor a formal notice. Stay away. From our home. From Sarah. From our future children if we ever got there. Do not contact us. Do not interfere again. If you do, the footage goes to the medical board, and the state licensing board, and the press. I gave her 72 hours to respond. She didn't. She knew better. Instead, I received a single envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "You win. I hope she's worth it." No signature. No apology. Just bitterness in cursive. I burned it in the kitchen sink. Sarah and I didn't magically return to how things were. You don't heal betrayal with apologies and coffee dates. We started marriage counseling. 2 sessions a week. Brutally honest conversations. Sometimes we yelled. Sometimes we sat in silence for an hour. Sometimes I wasn't sure we'd make it. But we kept showing up. Both of us. And slowly, the fog began to lift. The day Sarah moved back in, she brought her suitcase into the bedroom and said, "I want to build something new. Not fix what was broken. Build something better." I believed her, because this time the choice was hers, not her mother's. And mine, too. Eleanor didn't stay silent forever. About 3 weeks after Sarah moved back in, we got a letter. Certified. Official looking. From a lawyer. It was a family dispute mediation request. In other words, Eleanor wanted to regain access to Sarah, to our home, to control. She claimed she'd been unfairly cut off, that she was concerned about undue influence over her daughter. She was implying I was manipulating Sarah. After everything she did, my lawyer laughed when he read it. "She doesn't want mediation," he said. "She wants the last word." So we gave it to her. But not the way she expected. We agreed to a mediation session. 1. At a neutral law office downtown, with a professional mediator present. Everything recorded. Sarah and I arrived together. Eleanor was already there, sitting straight-backed, wearing a black dress and pearls, like she was attending someone's funeral. In a way, maybe she was. She didn't look at me. Didn't speak to Sarah at first. Just sat in silence while her lawyer spoke. Eleanor was deeply hurt. She felt ostracized. She believed her good intentions had been twisted. The mediator turned to Sarah, asked if she wanted to respond. Sarah looked at her mother and said 4 words. "You forged those letters." The room went still. Eleanor blinked. Her jaw tightened. Her lawyer began to speak, but Sarah cut him off. "I saw the footage. I heard your phone call. I know what you said. You tried to destroy my marriage." Eleanor finally spoke. "I was trying to protect you." Sarah leaned forward. "From what? From being happy? From growing up? From making my own decisions?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "You've always needed someone to guide you." "No," Sarah said. "I needed a mother, not a puppet master." That's when I slid the folder across the table. Inside, the toxicology reports, the printer forensics, the security footage transcripts. All dated, all documented. "Here's what we'll do," I said calmly. "You will not contact Sarah again. No emails, no calls, no third-party messages through family. You will not show up at our home, our work, or any future school our children attend." Her eyes narrowed. "Children?" "Yes," Sarah said without missing a beat. "And they'll never know you as long as you keep choosing control over love." Her lawyer began to object. I raised a hand. "If you violate this agreement, we go public. medical board, press. You'll never walk into another fundraiser without someone recognizing your voice from that recording. The mediator looked stunned. Sarah looked steady. And Eleanor? She just looked small. For the first time, she had no audience, no control, no one to manipulate. She signed the agreement. In silence. When we walked out of the building, Sarah gripped my hand tightly. "She'll never forgive us," she said. I nodded. Let her hate us in peace. That night, we didn't celebrate. There was nothing joyful about it. We just sat together on the back porch, watching the city skyline and letting the silence settle. Weeks passed. Then months. Eleanor disappeared from our lives completely. No more letters. No sudden appearances. Just silence. Sarah went back to teaching part-time. I picked up an evening shift at a free clinic in Bronzeville. We started rebuilding not what we had, but who we were. One morning, Sarah found a photo album tucked away in a box. It was filled with childhood pictures of Eleanor and her late father. She stared at it for a long time, then gently closed the cover. "I don't know who that woman is anymore," she whispered. "She was never who you thought," I said. "No," she replied softly. "She was exactly who she always was. I just finally saw it. It's been nearly a year." Sarah and I still attend counseling, not because we're broken, but because we're still learning how to be whole, together, without shadows. Eleanor hasn't reached out. Not once. No letters. No calls. No silent drive-bys. Just absence. And in that absence, we've found something unexpected. Peace. There's a quiet that comes after chaos. A silence where guilt used to live. I no longer second-guess the creak of the hallway floor. Sarah no longer flinches at text messages from unknown numbers. We have space now. To breathe. To rebuild. To trust again. One afternoon, Sarah turned to me on the couch. Sunlight spilling across her lap. Our dog curled beside her. "Do you still hate her?" she asked softly. I thought about it for a moment. About the lies. The manipulation. The way she almost burned us down with a smile on her face. "No," I said. "I don't hate her. I just know who she is now." Sarah nodded. "Me too." Not long after that, she brought home a small white envelope. Inside was a positive pregnancy test. We sat there, stunned. 1,000 emotions rising in silence. But the only one that stayed was clarity. This time, we wouldn't let anyone write our story, but us. Not out of fear. Not out of anger, but out of love. The kind that protects, even when it hurts. Because here's what I've learned. Not all villains wear masks. Some sit across the dinner table. Some call you dear. And some claim it's all for your own good. But love with conditions isn't love. It's control. And the truth? The most dangerous betrayal is the one dressed as protection. What did you think of this story? If you were in Michael's place, would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments. And if you support the quiet strength he showed, vote 2. If you think he should have gone scorched earth, vote 7. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge with Max for new, powerful karma stories every single day.